Hello everyone, you're on the Manhwa Vibes channel. Are you ready? Let's go! Jane does not believe there is a God in this world. If he really exists, why won't he save her? Oh well, let me give you a quick rundown of what this manga is about before we begin. The boys make fun of her. They ask her where her father is. They think Jane probably poisoned him. What's more, they call her a virus. And if you touch her, you're infected. Sometimes Jane herself has begun to believe that she is a virus, a filthy source of contagion. The boys laugh at the fact that one of them is now infected because he touched Jane. She is hurt to the point of tears that she is being treated like this by her peers. At this point, a girl appeared who was not happy with the way the boys were behaving. She told them that she knew what class they were from and tomorrow she would tell the teachers that they were bullying Jane. It was then that Jane believed there was a God. Because God had sent her a guardian angel, they were supposed to be happy. Emily called Jane several times, but she didn't answer. Emily needed her friend's support more than ever. Those missed calls changed their destinies. Something truly irreparable had happened. Jane saw her friend lying in the road. How did this happen? I can't get my head around it. Jane looked at Emily in silence and felt silent horror. This is where the story begins. Threats. She had been threatened from the very next day to keep her nose out of other people's business, especially as it relates to her friend who is no longer there. Otherwise, Jane would face the same outcome. In addition to threats began to spread gossip, although it has been a long time since Emily's personal photos were leaked. It even got to the point that people were willing to pay money to see these photos. They feel bad that this happened to Emily. Actually, no, they're not sorry at all, it's just hypocrisy. All they cared about was seeing the nude photos. And of course, the third thing is the conspiracy. She was followed almost every day, wherever she went. But when the moment of desperation came, he came to her. He's not God, he's the devil. He came down close to her. The devil was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Had black-colored horns and wings and was dressed in a costume that made him stand out from everyone else. His eyes have a mesmerizing effect. This devil's name is Ryan Howe. The time has finally come to keep the promise that was made earlier. Jane is sure that he has come to save her. It's a bright sunny day, lots of high-rise beautiful buildings around, but we're only gonna focus on one building. It's the VAN Group Business Center. Emily was sitting on the roof of that building right on the very edge. Judging by the fact that she chose to sit there, she's obviously in some serious trouble. At this point, messages started coming in on her phone. They were telling her that she had a beautiful body and asking her how much she would be willing to go to bed for. After reading these messages, Emily wanted more than anything for everyone to forget about her and stop discussing her. It truly hurt Emily to read such things. What got to her was what was written to her at the end. Someone unknown to her wished her to leave this world as soon as possible. Emily's tears rolled down her eyes and started dripping onto the screen of her phone. After reading all the messages, Emily decided to do one last thing. She called her best friend Jane. Emily begs Jane to pick up the phone as this is incredibly important to her. At this point, Jane gets in trouble. Some girls have started making claims because Jane seems to be hitting on the guy they're in love with. But Jane doesn't know who they're talking about. Jane thinks they are mistaken. She has an urgent business she is already late for, but the girls won't let her go and want to show her the photos they took a little earlier. Her cell phone rings in her bag. Emily has been calling her. Had Jane known how important it would have been to pick up the phone, they show her the photo. The photo shows Jane standing next to some guy. She scrutinized the photo. Yes, it was indeed Jane, and next to her appeared to be a very famous guy named Ryan Howe. Jane replied to them that this guy is known by almost everyone in this town. But that doesn't mean that if she knows him, he knows her. Ryan Howe is just a regular customer at her candy store. She was just placing an order. She figures her explanation is enough, and if nothing else is needed, then she'll go. By the way, the phone kept ringing, but Jane didn't respond to it. The masked girls thought for a while and decided what to do with her. They wanted to take the phone away from her. It's a real robbery. The phone fell out of the bag and broke into pieces when it hit the ground. As she continued to sit on the edge of the building, Emily heard that the caller was unavailable or out of range. Emily was tired of everything. That was exactly what she wanted to say one last time to Jane. Why is life so cruel? Jane runs as fast as she can to Emily. She hopes Emily doesn't do anything stupid. The looks on everyone's faces read, Emily deserves it. Jane calls her, but her phone is off. It's probably late. Damn it. Jane hopes Emily will wait for her. She's almost there, but the irreversible has happened. Jane sees Emily falling down right in front of her. Oh my God. Jane is in unbelievable shock at what she sees. She doesn't want to believe what just happened. After all, things could have been different, but the worst thing happened as a result. People around her are screaming and asking her to call the police as soon as possible. Jane moved closer to Emily. The impact was so hard that the spray flew onto her shoes. She couldn't stay on her feet and fell to the ground. Jane screamed with all her might for God to hear her in heaven, so that he would know how much she was hurting right now. The police have put reflective tape around the scene. People are talking amongst themselves about how pretty this girl was, although it doesn't matter what she looked like after she was smashed to bits. The police officers asked her not to take pictures and to move away. They believe it was her choice and such people should not be pitied. On this day, Jane lost her best friend. Everything they had planned earlier is now completely irrelevant. Behind Jane's back, the men are discussing their former coworker Emily from the finance department. She hears one ask the other if he knew her. The thing is, almost everyone knew her, as Emily's personal photos have been online for a long time. A man wanted to see those photos and asked her to send them to him. The man specified that she had a gorgeous body and he was sorry that such an accident happened to her. At this point, Jane couldn't stand the gossip behind her back and poured her drink right on the man's face. He screamed loudly, very hot. The man got mad at Jane because of this and didn't understand why she did that. Oh my God. Jane saw a picture of Emily on the man's phone. They were the same pictures of Emily with no clothes on. She abruptly snatched the phone out of his hands. The man wasn't expecting that. Jane didn't have time to get away from him as the man pushed her hard. Right in front of everyone, Jane fell to the floor. The man is outraged because of the people watching just standing there. He asks them to help him take his phone away from her. Jane tries to delete the photo of Emily from cloud storage as quickly as possible. Right away, security rushes over to them. A man is yelling for her to give him his phone back. Someone nearby is yelling for her to be let go. Jane is now trying to get there in time to delete the photo from her phone with no possibility of recovery. Her hands are shaking slightly from the excitement. Just a little more and she'll be able to delete it. Yay, success. The photo has been deleted. Well done, Jane, good job. The guards come running in and ask everyone to move away from her. A man doesn't understand why she wanted his phone. The man next to him said that Jane must be a friend of Emily's, but he still doesn't understand what he and his phone have to do with it. Everyone moved away from Jane and the guards took her to their office. They told her that luckily the man hadn't filed a report against her. The guards asked her not to do something stupid like that again, as young girls should be more careful. After they gave her a preventive talk, the guards let her go. Coming out of the security office, one can see that Jane is exhausted. She was very tired. The first thing she did was look out the window where the moon was shining brightly. A mesmerizing sight. Jane decided to go to the roof of the building. She became curious about this place for a reason. Emily had been here a while ago. This is where she jumped from. Jane apologizes for being late. She thinks Emily must have been scared of something. But for what reason? Jane decides to turn to God, if there is such a thing. She begs to be heard. She'd give anything for one wish. Thinking of Emily brought tears to her cheeks. Right away, she heard some kind of rustling. Turning around, Jane didn't see anyone. At that moment, someone said, "It's you, isn't it?" At those words, Jane froze in place for a moment. A man with wings and horns appeared behind her. Wow, it's the devil. He came down closer to her. Jane asked him where did he come from. He said that she summoned him herself. Oh, really? No way. She couldn't believe he'd heard her after all. As a child, her mother had told her a dark tale of the devil. A story about a newlywed couple who were desperate to have a baby. It was their lifelong dream, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't make it happen. Until a handsome young man came to them. He introduced himself as the devil, attracted by a wish he was able to fulfill. But in return, he wanted something of equal value. Without hesitation, the couple agreed to his terms. Little Jane was very curious as to how the story ended. Did they have a child? Mom replied that they had a beautiful baby. Jane asked what did they give in return then. Mom said that a deal with the devil couldn't have a happy ending, because the price to pay is too high. No man has ever gotten off easy. From this couple, he took away their bond, their promise to be together forever. After hearing this, Jane wanted to meet the devil and asked what would it take. Her mother looked her in the eye and told her that when Jane was desperate for something, the devil would find her. But she should remember that if she meets him one day, no matter how much she wants something, she should never ask the devil to fulfill a wish. Otherwise, Jane will lose more than she will gain. Even though the devil initially asks for something of equal value, it doesn't end up being the case. A mom asked to be sure to remember her words. It was at this moment that Jane once again remembered her mom's words. The devil descended to the roof of the building. Jane was confused by one moment. The man standing in front of her looks just like Ryan Howe. Jane lowered her head and said in a quiet voice that this all happened because of him. It was because of Ryan Howe that Jane had a conflict with the girls. If Emily could answer back then, she wouldn't have left this world. Jane screamed loudly that it was all because of him. The devil doesn't know what she's talking about or what he has to do with it. With tears in her eyes, Jane ran towards him to strike him. The devil swung his arm and lifted Jane off the ground. She demands to be put down. The devil reminds her that he's here to help fulfill her wish. He thinks it's a foolish act, venting her hatred by hitting him. He recommends Jane on the person she wants to settle the score with. Jane thinks the devil is right. She once again, but more politely, asks to be put down. Jane decides that the right thing to do is to calm down, since the real villain is not him. The devil beckoned her to him. He pulled her as close to him as possible. The devil felt a strong desire. He asked her if she craved for revenge. And why exactly? Jane told him about her friend Emily, about how she had been secretly filmed and the video distributed within the company. In the end, she decided to lay her hands on herself in front of their cold eyes. Jane feels that she must punish them, find everyone who drove Emily to this point. At this point, she asked the devil to grant her wish. But as stated earlier, the devil doesn't grant wishes for nothing. So what is it that Jane has to offer him? He pointed out that she had nothing except for her body. But still Jane had nothing to interest him. She didn't expect the devil to refuse to fulfill her desire. Jane was sure that he would agree. Jane tells him that he can't just pick up and leave. She tells him that this is her only chance. Jane was hesitant to say it right away, but she did tell him that he can have her. She's willing to give him her life. The devil only laughed out loud. Does he want her life? She has no value to him. As a matter of fact, in 100 years, she is the first person who dared to raise a hand against him. He found it quite amusing. The devil decided to approach her and say something to her. He told her that he was ready to fulfill her wish. The devil poked his finger into her forehead. At that moment, her mind became clouded. She asked him if her wish was granted. Jane pressed herself against the devil. He replied that when she woke up, her wish would be granted. And so the next morning came. Jane slept in her room. She woke up and felt as if she was in a fog. Still, she began to remember some things. Jane jumped out of bed with the words Ryan Howe. She remembered the devil. She thought it was just a dream. She looked at the picture of her with Emily. Perhaps everything is all right. Jane thinks it's impossible for superstar Ryan Howe to be the devil. It was definitely a dream. She's clearly in a bad mood right now. So why did she fall asleep with her clothes on last night? She looked at herself in the mirror and noticed something. Jane was horrified at what she saw. She found herself with some kind of bite on her neck. Then what had happened during the night was not a dream. At that moment her phone rang. She went to the desk and picked up her phone. In the company's chat room, the employees started to write that everyone had received severance pay from the company because VAN Group had gone bankrupt. This is a shock to all the employees as some need to feed their families and some need to pay their mortgages. All they do on the news is talk about the VAN Group. Jane doesn't understand how this could happen. She turns on the TV and it says that this morning VAN Group suddenly declared bankruptcy. Thousands of employees have lost their jobs. Jane doesn't think the company could have gone bankrupt overnight. She's convinced it's the work of the devil. What if it all happened because she wanted it to? Oh, that Ryan Howe. Haha, the devil was in the bathroom at that moment. He wasn't happy that she remembered him just now. That's why he had to fly to Jane. She heard some banging in her room. Jane did not expect to see him now. Since earlier she thought that maybe it was a dream, she doubted that it was real. The devil knocked on the window and asked her why she had called him. He was upset with Jane about how small her apartment was. She doesn't realize what's even going on. The devil reminded her of what she wanted. Jane wanted to punish those who made her friend jump down. She explained to him that maybe he had misunderstood her. Jane did want revenge, but she didn't mean leave everyone out of work. Since a lot of innocent people were left without a livelihood. She asked the devil if he had even thought about the consequences. The devil replied that every step has its consequences. Jane asked him to use his magic or whatever it is he uses as soon as possible and return everything back to the way it was. Well, he's willing to turn back time. But Jane will have to pay for it. She's willing to do that. For her, the most important thing is to punish the bad people while not absorbing the good ones. The devil's figured it out, and he's ready to grant her wish again. Magic happens before your eyes. It's all coming back the way it was. VAN Group will soon be out of bankruptcy. The company's employees will soon no longer be unemployed. Time is counting backwards. On TV, instead of urgent news about bankruptcy of the company as planned show entertainment show with stars. In the general chat room of the company employees there are no more messages about the collapse of the company. Everything is back to normal. Jane is shocked that the devil can control time. Of course he can. There's nothing he can do. Jane rejoiced at this and asked him if he could bring her best friend Emily back to life. He was silent at first. Then he looked at the photo on the table by the bed. The devil told him that he too had inhibitions that couldn't be broken. That didn't mean he couldn't do it, just that they couldn't be broken under any circumstances. Jane shivered slightly at those words. After all, she had hoped that her friend would come back to life. Devil looked at the photo once more and said that she had already made a wish. Now he should protect Jane instead of her. VAN Group, that's the company Jane works for. It's also the place where Emily did something irreparable. In fact, it's only been 18 hours since the event, and she's already become a thing of the past here. Her fatal act is just a topic of conversation on the way to work. But Jane's not ready to face it. She went to the finance department to get Emily's things. A member of the department approached her. He said that the cleaning lady threw the stuff out this morning. What? Jane resented the act. A man had just passed away yesterday and her things had been thrown out already this morning. She asked, were the things contaminated? Why had they decided to get rid of them as soon as possible? Jane said that Emily had worked here for 3 years. How could they be so indifferent? A coworker was outraged that Jane was making a claim against him, since he wasn't the one who had personally thrown out Emily's stuff. He added that no one wants to come to work and look at the belongings of someone who is gone. It's very embarrassing. Jane asked for another reiteration of what the finance officer said. He replied that as expected, a friend of an indecent damsel can't be a normal person. Jane threw the empty box on the floor and decided to leave. She was stopped by a woman. This is Nancy Freeman, the head of the finance department. She told Jane that if she had any problems they could discuss them without distracting anyone from their work. Jane looked at her without saying anything. Nancy Freeman explained to her that Mr. Lloyd wasn't very clear about the situation. He had misunderstood her, so Jane shouldn't take it personally. Nancy Freeman said that she couldn't just throw Emily's stuff away, since she had worked in her department for several years. Her stuff is inside the office. She asked that after Jane picked up her things, she locked the office with a key. Jane walked into the office of the department head. She started opening boxes. Jane thinks that Emily was so naive. So many stuffed toys, it's so cute. She pulled a photo frame out of the box. There were 2 pictures in the picture frame. One was of Jane and the other was of Emily. Jane thought about how Emily had just left her like that, leaving behind all this mess that she now had to deal with. Jane let a tear fall and whispered that she couldn't stand Emily for her stubbornness. She hugged the picture frame and decided to take it home. The devil visited the beauty parlor. The makeup artist thinks it's incredible. She's never seen Ryan Howe sitting so still while she does his makeup. The devil is just mulling something over. The makeup artist wondered what he was mulling over. The devil asked the girl, "She must have a close friend, right?" She replied, "Of course. So that's what you're interested in?" No, the devil wants to understand, would this girl sacrifice her life for her friend? The makeup artist emphatically replied, "Of course not. He thinks that's the point. A normal person wouldn't do that." I guess Jane's not exactly ordinary. Let's go back 11 years again, the schoolyard. The same day that the boys picked on Jane. They pulled her hair. They said she was contagious. They laughed at her. Jane could barely keep herself from crying. That's when little Emily came up to them to chase the boys away. It seemed like harmless jokes to them, but they didn't realize how much they were hurting Jane. They ran away since they were getting bored and it was just about lunchtime. Emily asked Jane if she was okay. Jane did burst into tears. It was the first time they met that sultry evening. Emily says that Jane is 3 years younger than her, but how did she get so big? Everyone will think she's younger than Jane. But what's the difference? Actually a huge difference, since Emily thinks she has to look like an older sister in order for her to be able to protect Jane and get away from those boys. Emily doesn't like people who are snotty. Jane replies that she doesn't. But Emily thinks Jane is a crybaby. At the time, neither of them thought those words would become reality, until a nightmare Jane would never forget. The girls stood across the street from each other. The traffic light turned green. Emily asked Jane to hurry up. She went to cross the road through the crosswalk. At that moment, a car appeared out of nowhere. The driver started honking at her. Emily yells for Jane not to cross the road as there is a car. Jane turned around and saw a car coming at her at high speed. Emily ran to save Jane. She pushed her out of the way, sacrificing herself. Jane saw the flowers and the goblet scattered on the road. That day, Emily's dreams of a dancing career were shattered because of Jane. The coffee was already over the rim of the cup. A man walked over and turned off the coffee machine. He asked Jane if she was okay. It turned out to be Jane's coworker. His name is Adam. He's the deputy head of human resources. Adam noticed that Jane was thinking about something. She replied that she was thinking about some work-related issues. Adam asked her to stop lying to him. He knew that she and Emily had a close friendship. Adam is sorry for what happened. She was a wonderful girl. He can't even imagine what kind of bastard spread those pictures. Adam asked Jane if she knew who Emily was in a relationship with. Jane wondered how on earth Adam knew that Emily was in a relationship. She told her that it was a secret. Jane wished she knew who he was. Emily had once said that her boyfriend didn't want to put the relationship out in public and hoped that she would keep it a secret. Emily didn't even tell Jane anything. Adam said that if he had only responded to her confession last year, Emily wouldn't have met someone like that and none of this would have happened. He believes that it was his fault, too. Adam revealed that he didn't like anyone back then the way he liked Emily. Jane replied that if there was nothing important, she would go back to work. Adam stopped Jane by putting his hand on her shoulder. He knew that Emily had no relatives, and all of Jane's expenses were taken care of. If any help was needed, Adam offered to turn to him. Jane thanked him for his concern, took her coffee cup and left. While Jane fiddled with her phone, people were making a big fuss about the superstar's arrival. Superstar? Jane thinks it can't be a coincidence. She asked her coworker which superstar was visiting them. The coworker replied that Ryan Howe had come to visit. She loves him, and she asked Jane to hurry up. What? Really? A coworker dragged Jane by the arm, as there might not be any free seats left. A crowd of Ryan Howe fans had formed near the window. It was so crowded that the girl was pressed against the window, heard from the crowd discussing him. They say that it seemed like his photos were processed and didn't think he really had such white skin. He is very slim and artists are supposed to be like that. As they continue to discuss him, the girls in the crowd say he's just skinny that you can't even see muscles. Come on, admit that you're just jealous. In her mind, Jane says she's going to rip his head off. What is he doing here? She told him not to do anything. Someone notices Ryan Hao waving at someone and looking at their window. Mentally, Jane warns Ryan Hao not to look this way. It seemed to her that he was trying to say something. He slowly said one word at a time to Jane. Hi. So, to recap, this is a girl named Jane and she made a deal with the devil for revenge. His human form is superstar Ryan Hao, but don't let yourself be fooled. He looks young and attractive, but he's actually over 1,000 years old. After the deal, he tells Jane about 3 rules she must follow. The first rule: if Jane says the name Ryan Hao to herself, he will appear. So he begs her not to think of him in the middle of the night, as by doing so she will interrupt his precious sleep. Second rule: every time she asks him for something, Jane must give something in return. Earlier, the devil bit her neck. Third rule: she only has 3 months to live. Why only 3 months? Because humans have a limited energy reserve, and judging by her unhealthy appearance, if the devil bites her again, she will leave this world sooner than 3 months. Ryan Hao took her phone away from her because he wanted to add his number and asked her not to bother him for nothing or he would hang up. He clarified that getting his phone number was a whole blessing. The moral is, don't make deals with the devil. Employees are discussing that Ryan Hao will be the spokesperson for a new line of cosmetics. And one hears that not just for cosmetics alone, the company hopes to negotiate a strategic partnership and invite him to be their celebrity endorsement officer. Everyone is standing around waiting for the elevator. Out of the elevator comes Ryan Hao and his security guard. The crowd of employees can't believe their eyes that such a superstar has visited their company and moreover, will cooperate with them. The security guard asks everyone to step aside and make way. Devil Ryan Hao smiled sweetly. He snapped his fingers. Everyone was incredibly excited except Jane. She's frozen in place. Jane looks around and no way, he's up to his old tricks again. Ryan Hao asked her why she was standing there, and he called her over to his place. Jane got really pissed off, but she went to him anyway. Jane thinks that when they're frozen like that, it's even scarier if they were moving. They got into the elevator and the devil closed it at the snap of his fingers. She asked him not to tell her that the time while they were frozen would be subtracted from her life. Bingo! Of course it was included in her bill. A damn demon. Jane thought to herself. Earlier she had asked him to take his time while she gathered information. Ryan Hao replied that she could certainly gather information, but he was here today to discuss his cooperation with the company. Her boss invited Ryan Hao to be their representative, and that is why he is here in person today. Ryan Hao asks Jane if she knows where the search needs to start from. She believes that the person who leaked Emily's photo must be someone she saw often, someone who has earned her trust. She already has a few suspects. The first is Nancy Freeman. Emily said she always made her life difficult. The second is an old man in her department who was always picking on her. And also Adam, the man Emily trusted the most, the one she never had to be on guard around. Ryan Hao leaned over to Jane and asked, "What's next?" Jane asked not to lean into her so suddenly. Devil Ryan Hao marveled that she was capable of thinking about another man in his presence. He thinks that Jane is indeed some kind of weirdo. Haha, Jane thinks that he's really weird too. Ryan Hao said not to trust men, especially attractive ones. She asked, including you. Ryan Hao hesitated for a moment. No, he's the devil. He can be trusted, but it's not certain. Looking through the mirror at Jane, Ryan Hao asked her if she always looked like that. She didn't understand what he meant. The devil clarified that she looked like she was easily intimidated. Ryan Hao blatantly told her that she wasn't worthy of being one of his men. He asked if she had seen the evening's revenge melodrama. Even women who fight on the battlefield change their behavior when they go to solve their problems. What? He kissed her. Jane's in shock, too. She doesn't know what's happening to her. Her body felt like it was starting to burn. What just happened? The company employees don't understand why they are all here together. The guard yelled for everyone to get to work quickly. People went to their workplaces. But it's still a mystery to them. Who were they just waiting for? It was like they'd all had their memories wiped. Devil Ryan Howe noticed that it looked more like Jane was getting a vengeful look now. She looked at herself in the mirror and couldn't believe what she saw. Is this really the Jane we know? To be honest, I like it, don't you? That kiss must have changed a lot of things. Jane doesn't realize, even if she had to change her image, did she have to? The devil reminds her that Jane told him that she didn't like it when he bit her neck, so he thought of another way. Jane was really pissed off. And now she was just mumbling incoherently, expressing her outrage. They got out of the elevator and the superstar was already waiting for the paparazzi. A lot of journalists and fans had gathered. They were chanting Ryan Howe. Devil asked, sticking behind him. Jane doesn't understand why everyone is so attracted to him. Someone in the crowd shouts out that they want a baby with him, and someone asks Ryan Howe to look in his direction to take a picture. People are wondering who is the girl next to Ryan Howe. Maybe his assistant? Looks good. Looks very familiar. Isn't she in advertising? What is she doing with Ryan Howe? The girls in the crowd talking amongst themselves say that the girl next to Ryan Howe is friends with Emily and apparently knows how to seduce men too. The devil asks Jane how she managed to screw up her relationships with men so badly. She doesn't know what he's talking about. Ryan Howe asked if she wants to know what they think. Their thoughts are all about Jane. She asked him to spare her from useless information. Jane doesn't care how they see her. She feels she should use the time she has left to make the most of it. Jane gets candy from the candy machine. Ryan Howe has a meeting with his bosses at the company, and after the meeting he wants to eat candy, so he asks Jane to buy him candy. But only the ones with his picture on them. Since he is allergic to the others, Jane was surprised that the devil likes candy. Hardly anyone could believe it. By the way, this is Red Arrow candy, super pineapple flavored. Jane heard a slight creak. It sounded like the creak of a door. There was someone standing behind the door watching her. Who was that man? She didn't expect to see someone and was startled. The unfamiliar man watched her for a while but then disappeared. Jane gathered her courage and ran after him. She shouted to him, "Stop." In the stairwell, she saw the man coming downstairs. She once again yelled at him to stop now. He ignored her request and rushed down the stairs even faster. Still, Jane caught up with him and grabbed his arm. She asked why he was running away from her, for he had heard what she had said to him. Worried, the man replied that he was just passing by. She took a closer look at his face. A man with glasses. She seemed to be starting to remember him. They had met in the department where Emily worked. Jane looked into his eyes and guessed he knew something about what happened to Emily. The man replied in a slightly shaky voice. Why would she ask him that? After all, even if he knew something, how would it help? Emily can't be brought back. Jane thinks she's on the right track. He definitely knows some valuable information. Jane angrily grabs the man by his clothes and tells him that he is right. Emily is no longer coming back. Since she couldn't bear the ridicule of those around her, that's why she left this world. She warned him that if he knew anything, he'd better tell. Jane will find whoever took her picture. The person who distributed the pictures. She would definitely find that person. He asked Jane, why should he trust her? She's a girl with no one behind her. At that moment, Jane let go of the man's clothes and froze in place. Jane remembered Ryan Howe and confidently told the man that she wasn't. She was not alone at all. You could see the man was slightly relieved at what Jane had just said. The man thinks that maybe what he knows is not that important. Jane asked to speak and she would decide for herself if it was important information or not. The man began to tell her that it all started 3 years ago. When Emily first joined the company, he liked her right away. He realized that someone like him could never be together with her. So for 3 years, he just watched her. The man never got his hopes up that she would be his girlfriend. He only wished her happiness. A man really wanted her to enjoy life. After a while, Brandon showed up. The man asked Jane, since she was her friend, did she know this Brandon? Emily liked him. She was willing to do anything for Brandon. She must have been truly happy, but he never loved Emily. And in the end, he broke her heart. The man at first thought that all her problems were due to unhappy love, but then he realized that there was something else. The department Emily worked in on the 12th floor, except that ever since he happened to see Emily and Brandon fighting, she no longer went to the restroom on that floor. She went to the 11th or 13th floor every time. The man also saw Emily warning her coworkers against going there. She didn't go to the restroom on the 12th floor. Exactly. Weird, right? And then everyone knows what happened to Emily. Jane wondered what was in the 12th floor restroom. What secret was hiding in that room? A meeting of the directors of the VAN group and superstar Ryan Howe. They're being told about the promotion plan. The plan is divided into 3 points. The first item includes all of their decorative cosmetics brands as well as a fashion clothing brand, something the devil isn't really interested in at this meeting. Apparently he has something else entirely on his mind. He drew a girl and signed strange female character. Ryan Howe saw Jane chatting with a security guard in the hallway. The devil wondered what they were talking so animatedly about. He carefully tries to hear their conversation. Jane asked the guard to tell Ryan Howe that she had some business on the 12th floor and would meet him when the meeting was over. She also asked him to hand her a pineapple candy. The guard was surprised by the candy. The guard can pass it on, but he has to know who it's from. She said tell him it's from Jane. Ryan Howe thinks they must be having fun out there. He was thinking something along the lines of, now let's see how you guys talk now. Ryan Howe is definitely up to something. All the guard had time to say was, Jane, you. And then he just started mooing. Jane doesn't understand what happened to the guard. The guard doesn't know what's wrong with him. He tries to say one word, but he can't. She turned her head towards the office where Ryan Howe is sitting and immediately realized who did it. You had to do something like that. The devil just smiled sweetly back and waved his hand under the desk. Ryan Howe thought that since she left, Jane must not have noticed that he was waving at her. Apparently she was starting to ignore the devil. He sent her a text and a GIF. Ryan Howe noticed that she immediately read the message from him. The president of the company finished his speech and asked Mr. Ryan Howe if he was satisfied with the company's advertising plans. The devil didn't hear what he had just been addressed. All he can think about is that Jane didn't answer him. Come on. She still hasn't responded. Ryan Howe is a little pissed. The president feels bad about being ignored. He tries to rectify the situation and told the directors of the company at present that apparently Mr. Ryan Howe is puzzled by the cooperation. Mr. Ryan Howe stated that no further plans are needed, but he has one condition. The president replied that they will accept any condition he has, even if there are many, as they are very interested in cooperating with him. Ryan Howe's main and only condition is that Jane from the publicity department becomes his assistant. They couldn't believe what they just heard. Who is Jane from the publicity department? No one present had heard of her. But one of the directors said that there seems to be some girl there named Jane. Jane is the new girl in this man's department. He said she didn't have any work experience yet. He suggested for Mr. Ryan Howe to find a more experienced assistant from his department. The director sitting next to him also supported his colleague that the assistant should be experienced. Mr. Ryan Howe clarified that he only needed Jane from the advertising department and asked to remember that if she was not available, then there would be no contract. The restroom is on the 12th floor. Jane looked around cautiously and put up a sign next to the restroom that there was some technical work going on. After that, she entered the restroom. At first glance, there was nothing special about this room. What was Emily trying to escape from? As for the women's private areas, there was only one thing Emily could fear in them, and that was a hidden camera. She stepped into the stall and closed the door behind her. And if that turned out to be true, what was Jane thinking? Where could the camera be hidden? The toilet's empty. Jane checks it thoroughly. She thinks she must be mistaken. Jane hears footsteps. It was the guard. He brought the tools she asked for. The guard was embarrassed as he is standing near the women's restroom. She said thank you loudly and asked him to help her, as she couldn't do it herself. The guard wondered what kind of help could possibly be needed in the women's restroom. Jane needs help removing the lock from the door. Before he does, he has a few words from Mr. Ryan Howe. Jane is at a loss as to what the devil Ryan Howe wants to tell her. The guard delivers the message word for word and with the same emotions Ryan Howe was feeling. He is outraged that Jane thinks he is like an errand boy to her because he doesn't respond to his messages and completely ignores her. He threatens to bite her to death if she doesn't respond to him now, and also told her not to think about leaving after work without him. Now the security guard helps her get the lock off the door. After struggling a bit with the lock, the guard managed to get it off the door. Oh, what's that? The guard immediately guessed it was a hidden camera. Looks like someone pulled the memory card out of the camera. If you look closely, there's a lot of damage to the case from someone trying to take it apart, and it looks like the damage is recent. Jane finds it odd that the memory card was taken and the camera was left behind. Apparently this person can put the memory card back in at any time. The guard is outraged that the camera is in the women's restroom. It's a total outrage. Jane thinks something doesn't add up. If whoever took the card wanted to replace it, they would have done it back then. They wouldn't have left the camera empty. No need to go back and forth and glow. Jane is almost certain that someone else discovered the camera and took the memory card. But who? The guard had completed Mr. Ryan Howe's task and also helped Jane with her request and now left with a final wave of his hand. The girls walked by and noticed that the restroom was closed again for technical reasons. They didn't understand why something was always repaired only on the 12th floor. Jane thought it was strange. She asked them how long ago this restroom was last renovated. The girls replied, the restroom was definitely being renovated yesterday. They clarified that almost immediately after the girl from the finance department jumped off the roof, the cops were still coming then, and the place had been renovated. Jane was incredibly grateful to the girls for providing the information. The girls wondered why she was so excited. Jane recalls that that's when Ryan Howe just showed up. She looked around and didn't realize where he had gone. Jane pulled out her phone and logged into the chat room. Devil Ryan Howe texted her, "You think I'm going to show up at the snap of my fingers?" Jane thinks he's pretty weird and doesn't understand why he's even angry. She asked him how she should summon him. She also shared that she found a new lead. Ryan Howe asked to call him Mr. Devil and then he would consider whether to come to her call. Jane smiled and thought about what a creep he was after all. She suggested that Ryan Howe meet her at the emergency exit tonight. He responded by sending her a gif of a cat saying, "Oh, come on." Time passed and evening came. Jane was already standing by the emergency exit waiting for the devil. It was getting too windy outside and she decided to wait for him inside the building. At that moment, Ryan Howe appeared. He knocked on the window for Jane to open the door for him. Ryan Howe asked her what she was thinking about. Did she miss him? Jane replied sarcastically that he's a mind reader now. He may be a mind reader, but he can't understand Jane's thoughts because he thinks she's too weird. Jane was surprised by these words. She asked Mr. Devil to tell her how strange he thought she was. In response, he only remained silent without saying a word. Call me, I'd bite all over her. She's so tasty." Shit, she knows everything. Jane asked him to follow her. They came to the women's restroom on the 12th floor. Ryan Howe laughed and asked, "Are you serious? That's where your important evidence is." He assumed that Jane had called him because she smelled a strange odor in the restroom. Actually, no. The thing is, she found a camera in the bathroom. But she's not sure that what happened to Emily is 100% connected to that camera. But it seems to Jane that Emily suspected something and the photos that surfaced were not an accident. What's more, the memory card was taken from the camera. Whether the owner did it or not is not clear yet, but Jane hopes it will help her find whoever has that memory card now. I wonder if the memory card or the person who took it will give Jane answers to her questions. Ryan Howe looked around and saw no cameras in the hallway and asked her how she was going to do the search. Jane replied that that's why she called him in. She pulled out some incredibly delicious candy, which Ryan Howe raved about. The devil thought to himself, how does this woman keep up with everything? A strawberry, I love strawberry candy. He asked her what exactly did she want. For Ryan Howe to be transported back to yesterday and see what happened here. Jane asked the counter question, can you do that? He replied, maybe, but not for a couple candy bars. Jane lowered her sweatshirt slightly and told the devil not to deny himself anything. Ryan Howe lowered his head and said to himself, I hate that woman. He looked her in the eye and said, give it to me. Jane didn't realize what he meant. Devil Ryan Hao changed in his face and started his bloodthirsty ritual of 3 fires, or in simple words, he started doing some magic. He was fully imbued with the dark energy and now he was ready to do the task. Jane has never seen him in this state before. She is shocked at what is happening now. Devil Ryan Hao asked her to give him a hidden camera. Jane puts the hidden camera in his hands. The devil focuses on the hidden camera. He started looking for anyone involved with the camera. Jane was scared out of her wits. There are no walls or closed doors in front of him now. He's completely analyzing the terrain. He's also scanning people who come within his range of the 3 bonfires ritual. The whole city is down because of the devil's energy. Some man is watching all this from his house and apparently realizes what's going on now. As he sipped his wine, he thought to himself that Devil Ryan who was truly insolent, isn't he? Definitely yes. The next day, the department had asked everyone to finish their business and meet in 5 minutes in the conference room. He hopes everyone is ready for the meeting. One of the employees is unhappy because she has to miss her lunch break because of this meeting. This girl suddenly flinched. Her friend asked her what happened to her. She told her friend that she had just been kind of touched by something. And she wasn't kidding at all. There's something furry in here. The friend asked her to stop being a jerk and said that being crazy is no reason to skip the meeting. But the girl affirmatively replied that there was nothing wrong with her head, but there really was something here. The devil felt a great deal of pain. What a pity for his wings. He thinks it's necessary to complain to Jane since it's a workplace accident. Ryan Hao decides to shrink his wings and after a few seconds hides them altogether. He thinks it's more comfortable that way anyway. Looking at the time, the devil thinks it should start soon. Emily's last moments before the jump. Ryan Hao hears Emily's coworkers ask her where she's going. Since the conference room is the other way, she replied that she went to wash her hands and will catch up with them now. A coworker noticed that Emily looked a little pale somehow. There she is. And now the main thing was not to lose sight of her and to understand what had really happened. He hurries after Emily with quickened steps. Since she can't see him, the devil Ryan Hao comes up close to her and looking at her face, thinks that she looks better up close than in the photo. He overtakes her and stands in the middle of the hallway. The devil said to himself, if she did something to herself, one girl would be very upset. Emily walked through the devil without noticing him at all. It is said that even the devil will not stop someone who decides to do something to herself. Emily walked out into the stairwell. At that moment, someone called out to her. It turned out to be Nancy Freeman. But the devil wasn't familiar with her and he didn't realize who the woman was. She asked Emily in the conference room meeting to stay close to her. Emily looked at her with a tired look. She apologized to the department head and decided that she should probably take a little break. Nancy Freeman told her that it wasn't her fault and told her to stop apologizing since she was getting embarrassed herself. And if Emily wants to take a vacation, then she can do that since Nancy Freeman let her off work. Yeah, she's got it all figured out. Nancy Freeman was about to leave, but Emily called out to her. Ryan Hao doesn't understand, but is eerily curious about what's going to happen next. Emily asks Nancy Freeman, she already knows them, doesn't she? The devil doesn't understand them. Who does she mean? Nancy Freeman was very surprised by this question. Emily also asked her why didn't she intervene? Why cover it all up? Why didn't she warn them? If Nancy Freeman had helped Emily from the beginning, then she probably would have found the strength to live. The devil thought to himself that it looked like the climax was coming. Nancy Freeman clutched the doorknob nervously. She started to make excuses, but Emily told her there was no need. She didn't blame her. Emily would remember her as a good person. At this point, Nancy Freeman became very anxious. She pulled out a memory card from her pocket and squeezed it in her hand. Nancy Freeman doesn't know how to stop Emily or what to even say to her. Emily doesn't have many steps left to climb to the top. Oh, Nancy Freeman seems to have let something out of her hand. A memory card fell to the floor. Humans, creatures far more complex and contradictory than devils. Time, there's not much of it left. Nancy Freeman retired to her office and walked to the window. She heard department employees from the hallway begin to shout that Emily had thrown herself off the roof. At this point, Nancy Freeman began to shake nervously and let a tear fall. devil Ryan Hao, though he had lived in this world for many years, but he never understood people. He walked out of her office. It remains a mystery to him why people do evil. Perhaps because they are already born evil. He walked over to the women's restroom, where renovations were just now taking place. Some masked man said on the phone that she was missing. Jane expects the devil, but something is holding up. Since she was getting bored just standing around waiting, Jane decided to walk down the hallway. Something caught her attention, as if she heard something. Jane once again gets the feeling that someone is watching her. Just like it had been this morning, she decided it was most likely due to extreme fatigue. No need to dwell on it. At that moment, a portal appeared next to her. Ryan Hao stepped out of the portal. Jane noticed that he could barely stand on his feet. She asked him what happened to him. He didn't have the energy to talk. Jane saw Ryan Hao start to fall and ran over to him. Caught him in time. But what happened to him? Jane is very worried about him and she thought the devil was hurt. She asks him to say something. Devil Ryan Hao tells her that he feels dizzy because he has expended too much energy. He thinks he is apparently hypoglycemic and really craves sugar. Devil asked Jane not to leave and to stay with him for a while. After a little thought, she eventually agreed. Jane touched Ryan Hao and she was surprised that he was too cold. The thing is, he's the devil and his temperature doesn't have to be the same as a human's. He thinks Jane always has a beef with him. She apologized and will try to spare his feelings. Jane thinks it's probably not a good idea to stand around as they might be spotted and suggests they go somewhere else. Ryan Hao and Jane go into a restaurant for a meal. Standing outside the door is his security guard. A waitress walked by and looked at the guard and thought he was scary. Not only is the devil hungry, but Jane is insanely hungry. Ryan Hao loves sugar. She asked him if he wanted to try her food. Jane said the food here is really good. The devil replied that he eats sugar exclusively. But why? Ryan Hao emotionally replied that he's terribly allergic to human food. Rashes all over his body. Vomiting. Diarrhea. And he could turn into a horrible, bloodthirsty demon. Mr. Devil has allergies. Jane thought it was cute. Ryan Hao asked her not to call him that anymore. But he asked her to do that earlier. Yeah, but now she shouldn't call him that anymore. Jane had noticed that devils were fickle. He opened a packet of sugar. Jane wondered, if he liked sugar so much, did he eat too much of it? There's no other way. Sugar helps him regenerate. Time travel takes a lot of energy, so now the devil will need a couple of days off. Until he's fully recovered, he can't use his powers. So Jane doesn't have to call him. He won't show up anyway. She apologized to him. Jane really didn't know it was that hard for the devil. Ryan Hao insistently hints that since he can be considered seriously ill, he needs not only rest, but also care. And if he continued to exert himself, something would happen. Jane freaked out. What exactly would happen? The devil replied that he didn't know, since he never tensed up much. You can tell. Jane decided to ask him what he saw in there. Ryan Hao told her every detail without leaving anything out. It took some time, as he saw a lot of things and it was necessary to tell Jane all of them. The guard stands tirelessly doing his duty. Yes, it's a boring job, though. Jane doesn't understand who they are. And why did Nancy Freeman take the memory card? Who was the man in the bathroom? And who was he calling? What role does Nancy Freeman even play in this story? Well, that's a lot of questions. Ryan Hao thinks Nancy Freeman is obviously a key figure in this story. If she talks, things will make a lot more sense. Jane agrees with him and she needs to get Nancy Freeman talking somehow. She thanked the devil. Ryan Hao stated that he is very sleepy and wants to go home. He suggested that the rest of the conversation be put off until tomorrow. They agreed to continue tomorrow and went home. Jane is finally home as she was very tired. She took off her sneakers from her feet. Oh my god. Who's that? Jane hasn't noticed him yet. Apparently some intruder had snuck into her house. There are water droplets dripping from the faucet in the bathroom. She decided to wash her face before bed and brush her teeth. But right now she noticed something suspicious. Who's behind the curtain? It looks like Jane still hasn't seen anyone or is pretending to be okay. Something tells me he's not here with good intentions. Jane begins to reassure herself that everything is fine and she needs to pull herself together. You could tell by her state of mind that she was very tense. Jane slowly closed the water faucet. She walked out of the bathroom and into the bedroom. Jane decided to play along and turned on the audio recording to initiate a phone call. Hello? Yeah, I just got home. What did you need from me so late? A snack? You're already downstairs. Look, I was planning on taking a shower and going to bed. All right, well, just give me a couple minutes. She grabbed her bank card and said she'd be right down. Jane opened the door from her bedroom ajar. She plucked up her courage and decided that now was as good a time as any to come out. Jane heard a loud pop. She carefully looked around. At that moment, some man with a mask on his face crept up behind her and closed the door. He asked her where she was going without shoes.